This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Welcome to Headline Buster, brought to you by The Point with me, Liu Xin. In this show, I will dissect China-related stories from around the world and discuss with our guests to compensate the missing pieces of the China puzzle. Join us in real time by sending us a comment or question via the CGTN page on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube or Weibo. If you're watching this live on the CGTN application, so please email me at thepointwithlx@cgtn.com. We live stream every Friday at 10:30 a.m. Beijing time, so do get in touch and your comments will appear on the screen. As usual, let me share one thoughtful message we have got since last week's show on some biased coverages of the Hong Kong protests. This viewer, a professor emeritus who identifies himself as an Englishman, wrote us a long message, including the following passages. There are several motivations for the overwhelmingly negative media reports of China in the West. There is racism, particularly from the US and UK, which have a long history of anti-Chinese opinion. There is an inherent arrogance towards China because Western elites consider themselves to be superior morally and intellectually. The arrogance introduced by a sense of moral superiority led to the despicable Opium Wars in which the British destroyed the lives of millions of Chinese. It is a pity that the youth of Hong Kong have not been taught their history. Indeed, the permanent disgrace of Britain remains to this day and is further increased by its meddling in China's affairs. A big thank you to this viewer for sharing his thought on the topic. The historical context is absolutely important when we talk about this topic. Now, the moral and intellectual arrogance comes in my eyes, a lack of understanding about Chinese culture and the Chinese people. I strongly recommend people come to China and see for themselves what China really is, who the Chinese people really are, and then the arrogance, the ignorance, I hope, will, and the discrimination, I hope, will go away. As for the youth of Hong Kong, it is sad there is no compulsory Chinese history education for them since the handover. Without knowing our past, we lose sight of where we come from and who we are. This must be changed in the future, however difficult the process will be. So many thanks to all those who have communicated with us. We're always eager to hear from you, from our viewers, especially if you don't agree with me. So please keep sending us your feedback. Now on to today's topic, Hong Kong again, as the situation continues to grip domestic and international headlines. Now, two developments stood out. First, the appearance of the People's Liberation Army soldiers on the streets of Hong Kong to clear roads damaged by the protesters and rioters. Then, the standoff between police and rioters on the campus of the Hong Kong Polytechnic University that started on Sunday night. Now, first on Saturday afternoon, People's Liberation Army soldiers stationed in Hong Kong left their barracks to help clean up rubble that was blocking the city's streets. Members of the PLA have been in Hong Kong since the city was handed back to Chinese rule in 1997, but have only emerged from their barracks twice in the past 22 years, the first time being last year when they helped in the aftermath of a major typhoon. Then, an unknown number of protesters and rioters started occupying parts of the Hong Kong Polytechnic University campus last week. But the situation escalated on Sunday as rioters tried to face off police using a variety of improvised weaponry and dangerous items, including bricks, firebombs, homemade napalm, and bows and arrows. One police officer was injured by an arrow which almost penetrated his leg. Speaking on Tuesday, Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam said that more than 600 people had surrendered at the university and that universities have become weapons factories now, and they look like military training grounds. The Hong Kong police announced on Tuesday that in the past day, the police arrested around 1,100 people for offences, including taking part in riots. Those who laid down their arms and surrendered were either arrested or registered and set free, depending on their age. So far, no deaths has been reported because of the standoff. But if you look at the international coverage of the situation, you might get a totally different understanding. For instance, on the campus standoff, you'd think those who occupy the campus were innocent students or even heroes, given the language used to describe the standoff. And that leads to my first example, the New York Times. On Monday, November the 18th, the paper published a story with the headline, "In Hong Kong, daring escapes from a violent siege at a university." Let's break down this headline one word at a time, starting with daring escapes. Now, daring means bold, courageous, or adventurous, or adjectives with positive connotations, as if the students who'd been hoarding homemade firebombs, giant slingshots, bricks and arrows and bones inside the campus. These are not toys, okay? But according to the article, that sounds like the students should be celebrated for their bravery. I can think of a few other words that would be a bit more accurate. Now, escapes, also misleading, since the article states that police officers have offered protesters one way out of the Hong Kong Polytechnic University campus, but they fear following these instructions could lead to their arrest. And despite running out of options, the students fear they will be arrested if they obeyed police instructions to drop their weapons and leave through one designated exit. So actually, there was no need for them to escape. The police offered a way out on the condition that the rioters drop their weapons, meaning the rioters who tried to escape either did not want to drop their weapons or who were afraid of being arrested. But it doesn't really work that way, does it? What kind of a police force would allow rioters to walk out armed with firebombs and bricks? What kind of a society would not arrest rioters who hijacked a university, turning it into a weapons factory and using it as a base to harm police officers? Where in the world will people be allowed to ransack a place and get away with it? By glamorizing those who break the law, whatever the motivations, whether students or not, the New York Times unfortunately failed to tell the true story. Our next example comes from the Washington Post, with a story also published on Monday, November the 18th. Now, Hong Kong protesters made last stand as police close in on besieged university. Never mind that by using last stand, the headline makes the protesters out to be some kind of gallant heroes who are faced with overwhelming odds. Let's get to the article this time. We need look no further than the first paragraph, which says thousands of Hong Kong protesters flocked to the area around a besieged Hong Kong College campus Monday evening, clashing with police as they try to help hundreds of students trapped inside to leave safely. Hundreds of students trapped inside. Well, 2 points I want to make. First of all, many of the people trapped inside were not students at all, so it was premature to characterize them as such. Secondly, when students are armed with bows and arrows, bricks and stolen chemicals from the school's laboratory, among other weapons, can we still call them students? Call them protesters, sure, but students give people the impression that they're innocent and vulnerable and thus worthy of people's sympathy. The damage and harm that have been done by some of these young students is actually quite obvious. We all saw the picture of the man who aimed a bow and arrow in full stretch at police. He was clearly an adult with strong muscles. I've never met such kind of a student before. Have you? Maybe in the US. The article mentions the students are trapped inside 6 times. To me, saying they're trapped makes it sound as if they are helpless victims without any option to leave the campus they chose to occupy in the first place. But the very same article then later explains that the police actually did offer the rioters a way out. Police blocked access and told exhausted protesters to come out of the Polytechnic University on Monday to be arrested. And late Monday, a deal was reached between the police and mediators to allow those under 18 still sealed off inside Polytechnic University to leave safely without arrest. So these people stayed inside the campus to avoid arrest. Basically, they're trapped by their own criminal behavior. And those under 18 were given the option to leave without being arrested. Let's not forget, a minor is fully capable of breaking the law. But I understand the leniency exercised here. After all, one of the two principles set by the SAR government and police is humanitarianism. But if you didn't take the time to read the entire article, you could easily walk away with only a biased slice of the whole story. By phrasing the beginning of the article this way, the journalist is hinting to the reader who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. Our final article today is just one of many international media outlets reporting on the PLA soldiers. The Guardian on November the 18th published a story with the headline, "Hong Kong protesters wary over elite troops clearing roadblocks." The article begins by outlining the events of the day in a rather matter-of-fact way in my eyes. It adds that when a local journalist asked one of the PLA officers what the group was doing, he responded, "We volunteered. Stopping violence and ending chaos is our responsibility. We are spreading positive energy." But the editorializing quickly sets in. For many, the article says, in Hong Kong, the message was not a positive one. Pro-democracy activists interpreted it as an attempt to intervene in the city's affairs. Amid Hong Kong's quickly escalating political crisis, anti-government protests that are now in their 6th month, many interpreted it as an ominous warning. So the article says many people interpreted the move as ominous. But then who does the article quote to back up this claim? A professor based in London. Not very convincing, huh? On the other hand, what about the local residents who loudly cheered the soldiers when they came out? If not many people cheered, at least some cheered very loudly and right in front of the eyes of the journalists, including that local one who questioned the PLA officer. Somehow, the journalists forgot to include the reactions from the people there. I wonder how they would interpret the move by the I wonder how would these local people interpret the move of these soldiers? Maybe an auspicious sign that these soldiers stand with the people of Hong Kong? Maybe something else, but definitely not an ominous warning. Actually, all of this is beside the point. The PLA officers are not the ones threatening the safety and well-being of Hong Kong. The rioters are. This piece of information is, of course, nowhere to be found in the Guardian article. A quick note on this topic. We originally wanted to dissect another New York Times headline that reads, "Chinese troops clean Hong Kong streets, prompting fears," in which the journalists called the events a tightly choreographed photo op that threatened to upend a fragile calm in a city bracing for more unrest. Think about all of the words, all of the contradicting messages packed in here. So the soldiers coming out to clean the street pose a threat to the calm in the city. I was wondering just how that claim could be made before a few days later, when the story mysteriously disappeared and was replaced with a completely different one. Well, I won't miss it. So, that's my monologue today. Please write to us to the platforms you're on or to the email address, thepoint@cgtn.com, and tell me what you think of all of the things that I've listed up front. We'll take a very short break and we'll be back with more guests to discuss this topic. Stay with us. Welcome back to Headline Buster with me, Liu Xin. Our topic this week again is Hong Kong, and I was dissecting stories from the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian, and on topics such as the standoff between rioters and the police in Hong Kong Polytechnic University and the PLA soldiers' move last weekend on the streets of Hong Kong. So we are welcoming in Qinduo, current affairs commentator, my colleague, and also Qiang, assistant director of the International Monetary Institute of Renmin University of China, to talk about this subject. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. It's good to have you always. Yes. Again, a very long monologue. So last week we were talking about, I think the most important story has been the standoff, right, between the police and the rioters. Indeed, it's a very complex feeling, right? You have obviously very young people, and Qiang, you work in universities, for instance. There are even people who are in their teens participating in what was happening on the campus of university. So I can understand the feeling in the hearts of many people who naturally, want to show extra sympathy towards these people. But on the other hand, if you look at the images, the kind of damage, the smashing, and that guy with the bow and arrow, and the police officer being clearly very severely injured by the arrow, which almost penetrated his leg. It seems that there are two forces tearing the story apart.
At the very beginning, it was a peaceful protest. I think, yes, many people would say they are exercising their rights of freedom of expressing themselves. No problem with that. Whatever grievances you have, as long as you behave, you represent your opinions peacefully and legally, most important, nobody have a problem with that. The thing is, it evolved into violence, and then gradually is out of control. Even those young people, they lost control of their own behavior, with the attack against the police force, with the killing of an old man at the age of 70 with a brick, and also the late someone, a middle-aged man who disagreed with them, who dared to argue with them, on fire. This is the kind of behavior intolerable in any society, and you have to do something. You have to stop this. You have to restore law and order in Hong Kong before everything else.
Qiang, your understanding, I mean, you deal with students all the time and on university campus. Can you kind of can you understand the rationale behind these young people?
Well, we all say the adults' world is cruel, but I can tell you the children or students' world are even more cruel. Why I say so is that the competition among students and the emotional impulsions among the students is much stronger than the adult world. Well, sometimes they will probably start with something very rational. They probably, like Mr. Xu just mentioned, they're doing the peaceful protest or something, but when there's someone probably is more jerk and more brave, and they will hijack the whole agenda. And the students will fall into what we call the emotional snowballing. And once somebody tried to be more brave or somebody tried to be more aggressive, the other people will try to compete with them. And the whole emotion will keep on snowballing to a bigger and a bigger. So that gets everything out of control, and everybody will lose their rationality.
That's a good point, actually. I mean,
Please.
the radicals mostly. We are talking about actually a small group of people with the radical ideas. There was a scene in the media, basically a teenager who was under 18, obviously, was taken away by their teachers and headmaster. Well, the other radicals, tried to drag him back, said, stay with us, let's begin and end together.
Yeah, peer pressure.
Don't leave us. So it's peer pressure. Those, people being radicalized, and the rest of the group somehow they were kidnapped. You have to go along with them. Yeah. This is the problem too.
We have a comment coming from this viewer by the name of Kenny Rao. It was on Twitter, on YouTube, and it says, every time a country talks about democracy in a place, normal people will suffer there. Syria, Ukraine, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, Venezuela, and etc. And now it's Hong Kong's turn. Qinduo, your take on this?
Well, this is an excellent point with this past approval of the bill on Hong Kong in the U.S. Congress. basically they are siding, made it public. We're siding with the protesters, the violent protesters over there, to overthrow the government, even to declare independence of Hong Kong. And then what kind of fate Hong Kong will have? Will Hong Kong become Syria, Ukraine, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan? No good choice. We got to be careful with that. And they somehow, I think the U.S. congressperson, they ignored the other side of the story, the violence, even the crime committed by the radicals. And they say, oh, they keep insisting, keep calling them pro-democracy protesters. As long as there's democracy, somehow everything is justifiable. That's completely wrong.
Yeah, Qiang, your take?
Well, I always saying that a lot of audience, when you watch the TV, you probably say the rioters, the young students, is out of their mind and they're crazy, making people angry. No, I think we should be sympathetic to those students. Well, they're actually also the victims. I'm mentioning is who is really behind this curtain pulling the string. It's some adult, somebody who would not really to show their face up on there. And they're using the young people to be like the ashes of the cannon and to achieve their agenda. And this is the evil one.
Absolutely. I mean, you were talking about the psychological snowballing. Actually, this is only one factor. I think this effect of psychological snowballing was being used by the people who are pulling the strings behind the scene to achieve their very dirty aims. It is well documented, and it is almost an open thing that these young people are paid to do certain things. For instance, if they get arrested, they will be paid a certain amount. There is almost a price list of what you do. If you kill a cop, you get how much money. If you get arrested, you will get how much. And there's a lot of money being channeled to push these young people in the name of fighting for democracy. I actually agree with you that in this case, many of these young people, the teens, are total victims themselves as well.
They are competing for the street name, the glories on the Facebook, and even, well, the sex, and even the money. So everything is luring into the trap.
Well, in the U.S. bill basically said, like, if you have a record for committing this violence in Hong Kong, basically it's like an honor. You can
still come to the
apply for
United
U.S. visa to go to U.S. to study. So they are encouraging such kind of acts, violent acts. This is very unfortunate. And also, if you look at the media, probably just have done that. The media somehow with this started tone to encourage the young people to continue your course with violence, paralyze the society, and try to subvert the government. But these kind of efforts, basically, they are trying to glorify, to justify the behavior, the violent behavior, which is against the law.
As I said, these articles I was reading about, they use words such as last stand, yeah, or
heroic behavior,
yeah,
video game they play.
Or students, never, always trying to kind of glorify or legitimize at least, or justify the action. And in the end, when these students come out, they realize what really they have done, right?
It will take some time for them to look back,
because
to see
some of
how
them
wrong they
will
were,
land
probably.
in jail if they're over the age of 18, if they have really smashed up shops. And actually, if you smash up something, and even if you're 16, let's say, you should still be held accountable in a maybe minor way.
Yeah, we encountered the situation before. We call it pulling out of the matrix effect, which is like, do you watch the movie Matrix? You unplug them behind the brain, and then suddenly you get out of the VR, you get into the reality. It's like when the students get together, when the emotional snowballing keep rolling, and once you pull them away from the crowds, you talk to them individually, they will suddenly back into the reality, and they will talk and think like a normal person.
Many of them, I heard reporting that some of them just started screaming and crying, realizing what they have actually done and the consequences of what they have done.
Especially those people, of course, from the Polytechnic University.
Yeah. Let's take a look at this comment first. So from this person by concerned citizen, if writers are writers, say so, and not say they're heroes or freedom fighters. That seems to be the most difficult question, most difficult thing for many people, right? It seems like Yes, they rioted, but because they're students, we're not going to call them rioters. And that is basically the most difficult thing many of the Western journalists find. They're not willing, they're not able to do that.
Even today, they are still calling them like a pro-democracy fighters. If young people get out of hand and ignoring the rule of law and regulations, then there will be chaos, the paralysis of the city we have seen over the past months. And Hong Kong has been sinking into recession economically, financially, and then even some people are suggesting this radical idea of basically shutting down this financial system in Hong Kong.
By burning
cash. Even crazier. So you have to do something to stop such kind of craziness and help everybody to come back to rationality and take a look what we are going to do to build the city. You know, let's have a bright future. Everybody should get involved, but not this way.
You know, I was talking to another guest the other day, and he said, in the eyes of many Americans, there is actually a confusion exactly where the violence comes from. You know, we see it very clearly. Okay, because the protesters turned violent, the police started to do what they have to do to bring the situation under control. Then the protesters decided they needed to use more violence in order to achieve their goal or to retaliate or for whatever. So that's how situations started to escalate. But most of the time it was the police reacting still always in a restrained manner to the stepped-up violence committed by the rioters. But it seems that in foreign media and in the eyes of international audiences, the situation could be very blurry.
But it's interesting. That's why there's coverage of condemnation of so-called police brutality. But if people are realistic, if you take a look at that, no one got killed by the police force in Hong Kong over the past months. No. But if this happened in the U.S. or in the UK, you imagine how many people will be...
You don't have to ask that question. Yeah, I mean, in South America, within a couple of days, 21 people killed, right?
And in Iraq, hundreds of people got killed. And also in Chile, the military was sent into the city, capital city, and also tanks were running on the city. And in Bolivia, more than 30 people were killed. There's no bill from the U.S. Congress, no U.S. media coverage, basically, say, encouraging those protesters and view them as heroes. No. Yeah. I think partly it's also part of the game, geopolitical game between China and the U.S. U.S. view China as a strong competitor. Some people in the U.S., they want to slow down the economic growth of China or the rise of China. So Hong Kong is a piece of chess here.
Yeah, well, the UK, I guess the UK cannot totally be absolutely, I don't know, clean in their motivations. At least they have taken some quite questionable steps. For instance, what happened concerning the staff, one of the staff member of the UK General Consulate.
Qiang, right?
Yeah, in Shenzhen, actually, the UK embassy here in China released some kind of a statement of the UK Foreign Secretary saying sympathy for him, standing with him, but it turned out,
they were acting too fast, I would say. It's
Why
like,
so?
this
guy
was...
the prudence, where's the prudence? Where's their sophistication?
I think this is just a show. I think this is just a show. Actually, when you are facing such a crowd issue or event, rationality is not something you should get involved into. For the politicians, they're not stupid. They're actually very smart because they have to react fast. They have to show their voters that I am supporting Hong Kong, because the voters actually in the UK, they have the emotion to support Hong Kong. So the politicians just try to utilize and leverage up the crowd emotion so they can get the vote, and that's it. Next time when they switch another stance, they probably use another attitude. That's the democracy, so-called.
But I obviously think that in this case, in Shanmouchen, they actually acted too fast.
Yes,
they had to delete that original tweet, which caused quite an uproar among the Chinese netizens. Well, we have to leave it there. So much to talk about. Many thanks to Qinduo, a current affairs commentator and my colleague,
glad to be here.
And Qiang from Renmin University.
Thank you.
And with that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point, of Headline Buster from The Point with Li Lixu. Many thanks for all the letters and comments you have left with me. I will take a look at them when I come off the show, and I'll highlight some of them next week on our show. So do keep sending them, and thank you for having watched it.